The darkness of deep space enveloped the Orion 7 rescue vessel as it drifted silently through a notorious sector known for alien refugee attacks and piracy. Inside the cockpit, Jack Renier sat with practiced calm, his experienced hands moving across the navigation console. The soft blue glow from the instruments illuminated his weathered face, highlighting the creases around his eyes, marks of both compassion and the weight of countless rescue missions. "Initiating scan sequence," Jack murmured, more to himself than to the ship's AI. His voice carried the quiet confidence of a man who had spent decades in the void, pulling survivors from the wreckage that human and alien conflicts left scattered across the galaxy. The scanner hummed to life, its beam penetrating the darkness, searching for any sign of distress. Jack had responded to the faint emergency beacon that had been pulsing for nearly 3 days. Most rescue teams wouldn't venture this far into the lawless region, but Jack couldn't ignore even the slimmest chance of finding survivors. "Vessel detected," announced the ship's AI in its neutral tone. "Classification: Kryzan transport ship. Designation unknown. Severe structural damage detected. Hull integrity compromised. Life support systems failing." Jack leaned forward, studying the holographic display. The alien vessel hung in space like a wounded animal, its once sleek design now marred by scorch marks and gaping holes. Debris floated around it, fragments of metal, personal belongings, and what looked disturbingly like bodies drifting in the vacuum. "Any life signs?" Jack asked, already reaching for his spacesuit hanging by the airlock. A pause. Then, "Single life sign detected. Extremely weak. Located in the central compartment. Oxygen levels critical." Jack's jaw tightened. One survivor. After whatever catastrophe had befallen this ship, only one life remained, flickering like a candle in the wind. He had seen this too many times. Ships attacked by pirates, refugees fleeing planetary conflicts, only to find death in the cold embrace of space. "Prepare docking procedure," he commanded, pulling on the sleek white suit that would protect him from the vacuum. "And keep scanning for any approaching vessels. Pirates often return to salvage what they can." As the airlock hissed open, Jack took a deep breath of the recycled air. The mission parameters were clear in his mind. Find the survivor, stabilize them if possible, and bring them back to Orion 7. Simple in theory. But he knew from experience that rescue missions rarely went as planned. Jack pushed off from the airlock, his suit's thrusters guiding him toward the jagged tear in the alien vessel's hull. As he approached, the devastation became clearer. This hadn't been a mechanical failure. The patterns of damage spoke of weapons fire, precise and calculated. Pirates, most likely, hunting for valuable cargo or worse, live specimens for the black market. He slipped through the breach, his helmet light cutting through the darkness inside. The ship's interior was a tableau of frozen horror. Alien bodies floated in the zero gravity, their forms strange yet recognizably sentient, humanoid with delicate, almost translucent skin tinged with blue. Their expressions were locked in the final moments of terror. Jack navigated carefully through the floating debris, following the signal on his wrist computer. Each compartment he passed told the same story: violence, death, and the ruthless efficiency of the attackers. He moved deeper into the ship, his breathing steady despite the grim surroundings. The life sign led him to a sealed compartment near what appeared to be the ship's living quarters. The door was partially jammed, forced shut during the attack. Through a small viewport, Jack could see movement, small, desperate. His light illuminated a tiny figure pressing against the glass. A child, no more than what would be equivalent to a 6-year-old human. An alien girl with large, violet eyes that reflected his light with a desperate plea. She was gasping, her small chest heaving as the compartment's oxygen dwindled. Toxic smoke was seeping through a crack in the floor, making the situation even more dire. Jack acted without hesitation. The door mechanism was damaged, and his tools couldn't override it from the outside. The child wouldn't survive the time it would take to cut through. He made a swift calculation, one that wasn't really a calculation at all, but an instinct born of humanity's better nature. He removed his helmet. The vacuum of space wasn't present here. The compartment still held atmosphere, though toxic and rapidly depleting. Jack placed his oxygen mask over the small viewport, creating a makeshift air supply for the child. His lungs immediately protested, burning as they struggled with the thinning, poisoned air. With renewed urgency, Jack worked on the door mechanism, his vision already beginning to blur. His muscles strained against the jammed controls, leveraging all his strength. The seconds stretched into an eternity as his body screamed for oxygen. With a final push, the door slid open just enough. Jack reached in, gently pulling the small alien child through the gap. Her body was light, almost weightless in his arms. She looked at him with those large violet eyes, confusion and fear giving way to something like wonder as he quickly replaced his helmet, sharing his oxygen supply with her inside the suit's protective bubble. "It's okay," he whispered, though he knew she couldn't understand his words. "I've got you. You're safe now." The child clung to him, her small fingers gripping his suit with surprising strength. Jack's breathing stabilized as the suit compensated for the additional passenger, filtering the air for both of them. He glanced at his oxygen readout. They had enough to reach the Orion 7, but not much beyond that. They needed to find the ship's oxygen storage. Jack moved through the corridors, keeping the child secure against his chest. The ship's design was unfamiliar, but the basic principles of spacecraft architecture were universal. Life support systems would be centrally located, protected by redundant safety measures. The passageways were a maze of destruction. Torn panels exposed sparking wiring, and the lighting systems flickered ominously, plunging sections into darkness before briefly illuminating them again. Occasionally, a distant metallic thump echoed through the structure, suggesting they weren't entirely alone. The child remained silent, her eyes darting to every shadow and sound. Jack realized she must have been hiding in that compartment for days, witnessing horrors no child should ever see. They reached what appeared to be a maintenance section. Jack's experienced eye recognized the symbols for life support, similar enough across species to identify. Inside, he found what he was looking for: auxiliary oxygen tanks, some still intact. He set the child down carefully, keeping her within arm's reach as he examined the tanks. Most were depleted or damaged, but 2 remained functional. Jack quickly connected one to his suit, replenishing their supply. The child watched his every move with solemn attention. Then, unexpectedly, she reached for something on the floor, a thin metallic rod that might have been a tool or writing implement. With deliberate movements, she began drawing on the dusty floor. Jack watched as shapes emerged, simplistic representations of 4 figures holding hands, a family. Then, with a slow, heartbreaking gesture, she wiped away 3 of the figures, leaving only the smallest one: herself. "I understand," Jack said softly, kneeling beside her. "You lost them." The girl looked up at him, and despite the vast differences in their biology, the universal language of grief needed no translation. Jack gently placed his hand on her small shoulder, a gesture of comfort that crossed the boundaries of species. A thunderous clang echoed from the corridor outside, startling them both. Jack immediately pulled the child behind him, positioning himself between her and the doorway. The rhythmic sound of heavy footsteps approached, mechanical, precise. Nothing like the organic movement of the ship's original crew. Jack dimmed his helmet light and guided the child into a shadowed alcove. Through a narrow gap in the doorway, they watched as a massive figure stalked past, a cyborg pirate, half organic and half machine. Its body was a grotesque fusion of alien flesh and crude cybernetic enhancements. designed for combat and salvage operations. A red sensor array swept the corridor, where its eyes should have been. Jack held his breath, keeping perfectly still as the cyborg paused, its head turning slightly toward their hiding place. The child pressed against him, trembling but silent. The air seemed to freeze despite the functioning oxygen tank. After what felt like an eternity, the cyborg continued down the corridor, the heavy thud of its metal feet fading into the distance. Jack released his breath slowly, feeling the child do the same against him. "We need to move," he whispered. "There's likely more than one. We'll head for the escape pods, if any are still functional." He picked up the child again, securing her within his protective embrace. As he turned to leave, she tugged at his suit and pointed to the drawing she had made, then to herself. "Eli," she whispered, the sound barely audible, pointing to herself again. Jack nodded, a smile breaking through his tense expression. "Eli," he repeated. "I'm Jack." She stared at him for a moment, then spoke again, this time forming a word that was clearly not from her native tongue, but an attempt at his language. "Friend." "Yes," Jack confirmed, feeling a swell of emotion. "Friend." They moved through the ship with renewed caution, Jack constantly scanning for the cyborg's return. The route to the escape pod bay was complex, requiring them to navigate through damaged sections and occasionally wait as the pirates' heavy footsteps passed nearby compartments. In one narrow passageway, Eli stumbled against a protruding pipe, causing a metallic clang that seemed to reverberate through the entire ship. Jack immediately scooped her up and broke into a run, the sound of the cyborg's quickened pace echoing behind them. They reached the pod bay, breathless and desperate. Jack quickly assessed the situation. Most of the escape pods had been launched or destroyed, but one remained, its systems displaying minimal damage. "In you go," Jack urged, helping Eli into the small craft. He quickly adjusted the life support systems to accommodate her physiology as best he could determine. "This will take you to safety." Eli's violet eyes widened in alarm. She grabbed Jack's hand, pulling him toward the pod with surprising strength, shaking her head vehemently. "I can't come with you yet," Jack explained, gently disengaging her grip. "I need to launch the pod manually. And—" he hesitated. "I think there might be another survivor." The scanner picked up only one life sign, but these ships often have cryopods that can mask life readings. Tears, pearlescent and luminous, welled in Eli's eyes. She reached up, touching Jack's face through his helmet visor, and spoke a word in her language. Though he couldn't understand it, the meaning was clear. A plea not to leave her. "I'll find you," Jack promised. "Wherever this pod takes you, I'll come for you. But you have to survive first. Please, Eli." A massive crash against the pod bay door interrupted them. The cyborg was outside, its red sensor array visible through the small window, focusing on them with deadly intent. Jack made a swift decision. He sealed Eli's pod, ignoring her desperate reaching through the transparent hatch, and activated the launch sequence. As the pod's engines hummed to life, Jack turned to face the door, armed only with a maintenance tool he had picked up along the way. The door burst open, the cyborg's massive frame filling the entrance. Its cybernetic arms ended in cruel, multi-purpose tools designed for both salvage and combat. The red glow from its sensor array bathed the room in an eerie crimson light. Jack stood his ground as the escape pod disengaged behind him, carrying Eli to safety. He raised the tool in defiance, knowing he was outmatched but determined to buy the pod the precious seconds it needed to clear the ship's emergency field. The cyborg lunged forward with surprising speed. Jack dodged the first swipe, the cybernetic arm leaving deep gouges in the metal wall where his head had been moments before. He countered with a strike of his own, the maintenance tool connecting with the cyborg's sensor array with a satisfying crack. The creature staggered back, momentarily disoriented. Jack pressed his advantage, striking again at the junction where organic tissue met mechanical components, a weak point in most cyborg designs. But his advantage was short-lived. The cyborg recovered quickly, sweeping Jack's legs from under him with a powerful blow. Jack crashed to the floor, the air driven from his lungs by the impact. The cyborg loomed over him, mechanical arm raised for a killing strike. In that moment, something small and metallic flew through the air, striking a control panel near the cyborg. Sparks erupted as circuits overloaded, causing a localized explosion that sent the cyborg reeling. Jack looked toward the source in astonishment. Eli's escape pod had not yet cleared the bay. Through the viewport, he could see her small face, determined and fierce. She had somehow managed to eject a piece of the pod's interior paneling through an emergency waste disposal unit, sending it flying into the control panel with remarkable accuracy. Taking advantage of the distraction, Jack scrambled to his feet and slammed his palm against the emergency bay door override. A reinforced barrier slid down between them and the recovering cyborg, sealing it off from the escape pod bay. Through the small window in the barrier, Jack saw the cyborg regain its balance. It turned its damaged sensor array toward him, and to Jack's surprise, it spoke in a halting, mechanical approximation of his language. "She is Princess. I was Guardian." The words faded as the cyborg collapsed, its systems failing from the damage it had sustained. Jack stood frozen, processing this unexpected revelation. Not a pirate then, or at least, not originally. A Guardian, corrupted or reprogrammed, perhaps after the initial attack. The ship's computer announced the successful launch of Eli's escape pod, breaking Jack's contemplation. He turned his attention back to his mission. If Eli was indeed some kind of royalty among her people, there might be others of importance on this vessel, possibly in cryosleep, as he had suspected. Jack made his way deeper into the ship, toward the section where cryogenic chambers would typically be located. His suit's oxygen levels were stable after the resupply, but he knew his time was limited. Eventually, the Orion 7 would recall him if he didn't return or report. The cryogenic bay was partially intact, protected by emergency bulkheads that had sealed during the attack. Most of the cryopods were damaged beyond recovery, their occupants lost to the failure of the suspension systems. But one pod at the far end of the chamber showed active status lights, albeit flickering weakly. Jack approached, wiping condensation from the pod's viewport. Inside lay another child, older than Eli, perhaps the equivalent of 12 human years. Her features were similar to Eli's, but with markings on her forehead that suggested status or lineage. The pod's display flashed warning signals: power failing, critical systems compromised. Without hesitation, Jack accessed the emergency maintenance panel. The cryopod's power cells were nearly depleted, unable to maintain the delicate balance of temperatures and chemicals needed to keep its occupant alive during the thawing process. Jack connected his suit's auxiliary power supply to the pod, providing the necessary energy to begin a controlled revival. As the revival sequence initiated, a warning alarm blared through the ship's communication system. "Warning, intruder alert. Secondary salvage team detected. Docking in progress." Jack's pulse quickened. More pirates, or perhaps the original attackers returning to complete their salvage operation. Either way, he and the cryopod's occupant were in imminent danger. The pod systems indicated the revival would take several more minutes, time they didn't have. Jack looked around desperately for an alternative. His gaze fell on a small maintenance access tunnel, barely large enough for him to crawl through with the child once she was revived. A crash echoed from the corridor outside the cryogenic bay. Jack positioned himself between the door and the pod, tool raised, prepared to defend the unconscious child as he had defended Eli. The door buckled under some tremendous force, then gave way entirely. In the opening stood another cyborg, smaller than the first, but moving with a quickness that suggested more advanced technology. Its sensor array focused immediately on Jack, then shifted to the cryopod behind him. "Step aside! Human!" it commanded, its voice more articulate than the first cyborg's had been. "The princess is our property now." "She's not property," Jack replied, stance unwavering. "She's a child." The cyborg's head tilted in what might have been amusement. Sentiment. Typical human weakness. It stepped forward, extending an arm that transformed into a weapon. Final warning. Jack didn't wait for the attack. He lunged forward, ducking under the cyborg's arm and driving his tool into its midsection. The cyborg reacted with inhuman speed, grabbing Jack and hurling him against the wall with bone-jarring force. Stars exploded in Jack's vision as his head struck the metal surface. He slumped to the floor, dazed but conscious. The cyborg advanced on the cryopod, weapon arm raised to sever the power connection Jack had established. With a surge of desperate energy, Jack threw himself at the cyborg's legs, toppling it off balance. They crashed into a bank of monitoring equipment, the cyborg's superior strength giving it the advantage as it pinned Jack down, mechanical fingers closing around his throat. "Your interference is futile," the cyborg stated, increasing pressure on Jack's windpipe. "The Kryzen royal line ends today." As darkness began to edge Jack's vision, a soft chime sounded from the cryopod. The revival sequence was complete. The pod's cover retracted, releasing a cloud of cryovapors into the room. The cyborg's head swiveled toward the sound, its grip on Jack momentarily loosening. It was all the opening Jack needed. He drove his knee upward, dislodging the cyborg enough to slip from its grasp and roll toward the maintenance access tunnel. "This way!" he called to the emerging figure from the cryopod. "Quickly!" The older alien child, still disoriented from cryosleep, stumbled from the pod. Her violet eyes, identical to Eli's, widened at the sight of the cyborg. She hesitated, recognition evident in her expression. "Guardian unit?" she asked, her voice musical yet uncertain. The cyborg paused, its sensor array flickering. "Kira, Princess, my programming has been altered. I cannot override my directives. You must terminate me." Jack watched in astonishment as conflict visibly manifested in the cyborg's movements. Jerky, uncoordinated, as though two separate command structures were battling for control. "Kira!" Jack called urgently. "We have to go, now!" The girl, Kira, tore her gaze from the struggling cyborg and rushed to Jack's side. Together, they scrambled into the maintenance tunnel, Jack pulling the access panel closed behind them, just as the cyborg lunged forward, its moment of hesitation over. They crawled through the narrow space, the sound of the cyborg tearing at the access panel fading as they put distance between them. Kira moved with surprising agility for someone just awakened from cryosleep. "Who are you?" she asked in perfect, unaccented English, startling Jack. "Why do you help us?" "I'm a rescue pilot," Jack explained, guiding them through a junction in the tunnel. "I picked up your ship's distress signal. Your sister is safe. I sent her in an escape pod." "Eli is not my sister," Kira corrected, her tone formal despite their desperate circumstances. "She is my attendant's daughter, but I thank you for saving her." She paused. "The Guardians? They were reprogrammed?" Jack nodded, helping her navigate a particularly tight section of the tunnel. "It seems that way. The first one I encountered mentioned being your guardian before it shut down." Kira's expression darkened. "The Vesperian Confederacy has been trying to eliminate our royal line for generations. They must have finally found a way to corrupt our guardian protocols." She glanced back the way they had come. "Those who follow us are not guardians but hunters, programmed to terminate any surviving Kryzen royalty." They reached another junction, this one opening into what appeared to be an engine maintenance area. Jack peered out cautiously before helping Kira from the tunnel. The distant sound of mechanical movement echoed through the ship's structure. There's another escape pod bay on the lower level, Kira informed him, orienting herself with the ship's layout. It's reserved for royal evacuation. It might still be intact. Jack checked his suit's oxygen levels and power. Both were lower than he'd like, but sufficient if they moved quickly. Lead the way, but stay close. They navigated through the ship's damaged interior, Kira displaying a regal composure that belied her age. Twice they were forced to hide as cyborg hunters passed nearby, their heavy footsteps and scanning patterns becoming familiar enough to anticipate. The Royal Escape Bay was located behind a concealed panel that Kira activated with a complex series of gestures. Inside, a single escape pod remained, more elaborate than the standard model Eli had used, equipped with advanced navigation and life support systems. "It will accommodate us both," Kira stated, moving to the control panel. "I can program it to rendezvous with a Kryzen outpost in the neighboring system." "Wait," Jack said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I need to send a signal to my ship first. They'll be looking for me." He accessed his suit's communication system, composing a brief message to the Orion 7 with their intended coordinates. As he worked, Kira prepared the escape pod, her small fingers moving with practiced precision across the alien controls. A crash from outside the bay announced that they had been discovered. Jack finished transmitting his message and hurried Kira into the pod. As he was about to follow, the wall beside them exploded inward, revealing the smaller cyborg, now joined by two more identical units. "Go!" Jack shouted, shoving Kira fully into the pod and slamming his fist on the interior launch control. The pod's door began to close, but not before Kira reached out, grabbing Jack's suit and pulling with surprising strength. "Both or neither," she declared, her violet eyes flashing with the same determination he had seen in Eli's. Jack tumbled into the pod as the door sealed behind him. The cyborgs converged on the pod, mechanical arms tearing at the hull as the launch sequence initiated. For a terrifying moment, it seemed the pod might be damaged before it could launch. Then, with a sudden surge of power, the pod broke free, accelerating down the launch tube and away from the derelict ship, through the viewport. Jack watched as the cyborgs grew smaller, their reaching arms a final, futile gesture against their escaping quarry. Kira sat in the pilot's seat, her posture perfect despite the chaos they had just escaped. "Thank you," she said formally. "You have preserved the Kryzen royal line at great personal risk. My people will honor your courage." Jack removed his helmet, taking a deep breath of the pod's clean air. "I'm just doing my job, and I couldn't leave you behind." "Nevertheless," Kira insisted, "a debt is owed." She paused, studying him with those penetrating violet eyes. "You said Eli is safe?" "I launched her in another pod," Jack confirmed. "It was set on an automatic course to the nearest safe harbor. My ship, the Orion 7, should be tracking it." Kira nodded, relief briefly softening her formal demeanor. "She is very young to be alone. I hope your people find her quickly." Before Jack could respond, the pod's communication system crackled to life. A human voice, tense but professional, came through. "Unidentified vessel. This is the Earth Interstellar Rescue Ship Resolute. We have received a distress signal from this location. Identify yourself." Jack leaned forward, activating the response channel. "Resolute, this is Jack Renner, rescue pilot from Orion 7. I have a survivor with me, a child. We've escaped from a Kryzen transport ship that was attacked. There's another child in an escape pod that launched earlier. She needs immediate assistance." "Understood, Renner," the voice replied. "We have located the first pod and retrieved its occupant. She is safe aboard and receiving medical attention. Transmit your coordinates for retrieval." Relief washed over Jack. Eli was safe. He quickly sent their position data to the Resolute, then turned to Kira. "They've found Eli. We'll be joining her soon." For the first time, Kira's composure cracked slightly, a genuine smile transforming her face from regal to childlike. I am glad, she admitted. Thank you, Jack Renair. The Resolute located their pod within the hour, its imposing bulk a welcome sight as it maneuvered alongside them. The docking procedure was smooth, experienced hands guiding their small craft into the rescue ship's bay. As the airlock cycled, Jack heard the sound of armored footsteps approaching. The Resolute's security team, standard procedure when retrieving survivors from potentially hostile situations. The door opened to reveal 4 armed personnel in Earth Interstellar Rescue insignia. Jack Renair? The lead officer questioned, lowering his weapon slightly. Jack nodded, stepping forward with Kira close behind him. This is Kira, a survivor from the Kryzan ship. She needs medical attention. The security team escorted them through the Resolute's corridors to the medical bay. The ship was larger than the Orion 7, designed for extended rescue operations in dangerous territories. Its crew moved with the efficiency that came from regular exposure to crisis situations. In the medical bay, a doctor was already attending to Eli, who sat on an examination table, a thermal blanket wrapped around her small shoulders. When she saw Jack and Kira enter, her face lit up with joy, and she leaped from the table, rushing toward them. "Eli!" Kira exclaimed, dropping her formal bearing entirely as she knelt to embrace the younger child. They spoke rapidly in their native language, Eli's words tumbling out in an emotional torrent, while Kira stroked her hair soothingly. "They'll be fine," said a voice beside Jack. He turned to see a tall, thin man in a doctor's coat, his kind eyes creased with smile lines. "I'm Dr. Ryan. We've given the little one a thorough examination. Remarkable resilience these Kryzans have. Some mild oxygen deprivation, but no permanent damage." "And the other cyborgs?" Jack asked. "The ones still on the ship?" "Neutralized," replied one of the security officers. "We boarded after receiving your transmission. Found 3 hunter units searching the vessel. Pulse grenades took care of them." Dr. Ryan guided Jack to another examination table. "Your turn. You've been exposed to toxic atmosphere, engaged in combat with cyborgs, and if I'm not mistaken, that's a concussion you're trying to hide." Jack submitted to the examination, his eyes never leaving the 2 alien children. Eli was animated now, demonstrating something with expansive gestures, while Kira listened attentively. Despite their ordeal, they had already begun to recover, children's resilience transcending species boundaries. The journey back to Earth took several days, during which Jack spent most of his time with Eli and Kira. The language barrier with Eli gradually diminished as Dr. Ryan provided translation devices, though she seemed to prefer communicating through drawings and gestures, particularly with Jack. Kira, fluent in English thanks to her royal education, explained their situation more fully. The Kryzan had been a peaceful, advanced civilization until the Vesperian Confederacy began systematic attacks on their colonies. The transport ship had been carrying the royal family to a diplomatic summit when it was ambushed. The Guardians, cybernetic protectors programmed to defend the royal family at all costs, had been corrupted by Vesperian technology, turned against those they were meant to protect. "I am the last of my direct line," Kira explained with dignity beyond her years. "When I come of age, I will reclaim my position and work to unify our scattered people." Jack listened, marveling at her composure and determination. "That's a heavy burden for someone so young." Kira's violet eyes met his with ancient wisdom. "We all bear the burdens we are given. Jack Renair, you bear yours with honor, risking your life for strangers among the stars." Upon reaching Earth, they docked at the Interstellar Refugee Processing Center. Jack, now fully recovered thanks to Dr. Ryan's care, escorted Eli and Kira through the disembarkation procedures. The center was a sprawling complex of buildings designed to house, process, and eventually resettle non-human refugees. A stern-faced official met them at processing, datapad in hand. The children will be assigned to appropriate foster families, familiar with Kryzan physiology and culture, she informed Jack. Not unkindly, but with bureaucratic efficiency. Given the younger one's attachment to you, we'll ensure regular visitation rights. Jack frowned, a decision crystallizing in his mind, one that had been forming since that moment he'd removed his helmet to save a gasping alien child. I'd like to apply for guardianship, he stated firmly. The official blinked in surprise. That's unusual, Mr. Renner. There are procedures, evaluations, cultural compatibility assessments. I understand, Jack interrupted. I'll complete whatever is required. But these children have been through enough trauma. They need stability, not another separation. Kira stepped forward, her royal bearing evident even in the sterile processing center. I wish to stay with Jack Renner as well. He has proven himself worthy of our trust and care. The official looked between them, then sighed. I'll initiate the application process. It will take time, and there are no guarantees. Thank you, Jack replied, feeling Eli's small hand slip into his own. The months that followed were filled with bureaucratic hurdles, home evaluations, cultural education classes, and endless paperwork. Jack took leave from his rescue pilot duties, focusing entirely on creating a suitable home for Eli and Kira. He purchased a small house with a garden in a community known for its diversity and acceptance of non-human residents. Throughout the process, Eli and Kira stayed in a temporary housing facility, with Jack visiting daily. Eli's English improved rapidly, though she retained a musical accent that transformed ordinary words into something magical. Kira divided her time between cultural education, ensuring she maintained her knowledge of Kryzan traditions and adapting to Earth customs. Finally, on a clear spring morning, Jack received the notification he had been waiting for. His guardianship application had been approved. He drove to the housing facility with barely contained excitement, arriving to find Eli and Kira already waiting with their few possessions packed. Home, Eli asked simply, her violet eyes hopeful. Home, Jack confirmed, his heart full. Their new life together began that day. The adjustment period was not without challenges. Earth's gravity was slightly stronger than what the girls were accustomed to, and certain common foods caused allergic reactions that required careful meal planning. But they adapted together, learning each other's ways and building new traditions. Eli enrolled in the local school, initially shy but gradually making friends with human and non-human children alike. Her artistic talents blossomed under the guidance of a dedicated teacher who recognized her unique perspective. Her drawings, once limited to the family she had lost, expanded to include vibrant landscapes, fantastical creatures, and increasingly, portraits of Jack, Kira, and their new life together. Kira, older and more aware of her responsibilities, divided her time between Earth education and communication with scattered Kryzan communities across the galaxy. Jack helped her establish contact with surviving royal advisors, ensuring her heritage and training continued despite her exile. She developed an interest in medicine, fascinated by Dr. Ryan's work aboard the Resolute. I wish to heal, she explained to Jack one evening as they sat in the garden, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors reminiscent of Kryzan atmospheric patterns. Our guardians were programmed to protect through force. I would protect through preservation of life. Jack found work at the local spaceport, repairing vessels rather than piloting them. The regular hours and planet-bound location allowed him to be home each evening, to help with homework, to tend the garden that had become Eli's special project, and to listen to Kira's increasingly sophisticated observations about Earth culture and politics. On quiet nights, when the day's activities had exhausted the girls into peaceful sleep, Jack would sometimes sit between their beds, marveling at the turns his life had taken, from the cold void of space to the warmth of family, from solitary rescue missions to the daily adventures of raising two extraordinary children from another world. He remembered that moment in the damaged alien ship, the split-second decision to remove his helmet, to share his oxygen with a gasping alien child he had never met before. In that moment of pure instinct, he had found his true purpose, not just to rescue bodies from the void, but to nurture souls that had been adrift. 1 year after their arrival on Earth, they celebrated what they had designated as their family day. The garden bloomed with a mixture of earth flowers and specially cultivated chrysan plants, their alien bioluminescence adding a magical quality to the twilight gathering. Eli, now conversational in English though, still preferring art for complex emotions, presented Jack with a drawing, 3 figures standing hand in hand beneath a sky filled with stars. "Family," she said simply, pointing to each figure in turn. Eli, Kira, Jack. Kira, more reserved but no less sincere, offered a small device she had constructed with help from her science teacher. When activated, it projected a 3-dimensional star map, showing both Earth and the distant Chrysan homeworld, connected by a glowing line. 2 homes, she explained. 1 family. Jack gathered them both in his arms. These children of the stars, who had become his reason for being. "Sometimes," he told them softly, "we have to sacrifice something precious to find something even more valuable. I gave up my oxygen that day, but I gained so much more." Eli looked up at him, her violet eyes reflecting the garden's lights. "What did you gain?" Jack smiled, tightening his embrace around both girls. "Hope, family, the future." As night fell fully, they remained in the garden, Eli and Kira pointing out constellations visible from Earth, Jack adding stories from his years traversing those same star patterns. 3 beings from different worlds, united by a single moment of selfless compassion in the cold emptiness of space. In the years that followed, their bond only strengthened. Eli's artistic talents earned her recognition beyond their community, her unique perspective as a non-human, capturing the imagination of galleries and collectors. Kira pursued her medical studies with dedicated precision, combining Earth medical knowledge with Chrysan biological understanding to pioneer new treatments for interspecies conditions. Jack watched them grow, guiding when needed, supporting always, and learning as much from them as they learned from him. The small house expanded to accommodate Kira's laboratory equipment and Eli's studio space. The garden flourished with an ever-growing variety of earth and chrysan plants, becoming a sanctuary for all 3. Occasionally, news would reach them of Vesperian activities against remaining chrysan settlements. During these times, Kira would grow quiet, the weight of her heritage and responsibility settling visibly on her young shoulders. Jack and Eli would wordlessly close ranks around her, offering the comfort of family when the burden of princess seemed too heavy to bear alone. As Eli approached adolescence, her memories of the attack began to surface in nightmares that left her gasping for breath. Reliving those moments of oxygen deprivation, Jack would sit with her through these episodes, steady and present, reminding her with each calm breath that she was safe, that air was plentiful, that she was loved. Kira, in turn, found herself torn between her growing connection to Earth and her duty to her scattered people. On her 16th birthday, translated to Earth calendar, she received a message from a Chrysan Elder Council, requesting her return to help unify the remaining colonies. "I don't want to leave," she confessed to Jack, her usual composure cracking. "But my people need me." Jack took her hands in his, their difference in size less pronounced now that she had grown. "Your people do need you," he agreed. "But they need you prepared, educated, and supported. Your time on Earth isn't taking you away from your duty. It's preparing you to fulfill it better when the time comes." The balance they struck allowed Kira to continue her medical studies while beginning diplomatic training with Earth's Interstellar Relations Department. She would eventually serve as a bridge between worlds. But for now, she remained part of the family that had formed in the aftermath of tragedy. One evening, as Jack prepared dinner, a fusion of Earth and Kryzen cuisine that had become their standard fare, he overheard Eli explaining something to a school friend who had come to visit. "My father gave up his oxygen for me," she was saying, her English now fluent though still musical. "He didn't know me. I wasn't even his species. But he took off his helmet anyway." "Weren't you scared?" the friend asked. "Terrified," Eli admitted. "But when someone shows that kind of love, the kind that risks everything, fear doesn't stand a chance." Jack paused in his cooking, struck by her words. Father. She had called him father. Not rescuer or guardian or Jack, but father. The simple word contained universes of meaning, crossing the boundaries of biology, species, and the vastness of space itself. Later that night, after the house had settled into silence, Jack sat in the garden, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there was the derelict ship where he had made the choice that changed everything. Somewhere among those points of light, a small oxygen mask had become the foundation of a family. "Some sacrifices," he whispered to the night sky, "are no sacrifice at all." The garden plants seemed to glow a little brighter in response, as if the universe itself was acknowledging a fundamental truth, that sometimes, in giving away what we think we need to survive, we find the very reason for living.